Guys, welcome back to the Real Sports Talk. I have Larry Weir here, a play-by-play broadcaster for Eastern Washington Eagles. Super excited to have him with us. Appreciate you, Larry. Anything you would like to say first? Sorry, before I'm just.
No, I'm happy to be with you.
I thank you. I appreciate you. All right, so let's just get right into it real quick. I kind of want to talk a little bit about this past season, Eastern season. They went to the NIT this year, and they faced WSU and Oklahoma State, where they beat WSU 81-74 and then lost to Oklahoma State 71-60. What were some of, I know it wasn't that long ago, but what are some of the memories? Have you ever been to an NIT before? Have you ever broadcasted an NIT?
Yes, back in 2004, Eastern had their first NIT berth. They played at the University of Wyoming, and they lost that game. The winner of that what the winner of that did. It was Wyoming that won. They went on and played at North Carolina, so I was a little bummed about that because I figured that would be maybe my only opportunity ever to do a game from UNC. So that didn't happen, and sure enough, almost 20 years later, I haven't done a game from UNC. So that was a tough one, but it was a good year for Eastern, but probably a little disappointing just because they won the regular season in the Big Sky Conference, but they lost in their first game in the conference tournament. So the NIT wasn't the tournament they wanted to play in, but yet they won against a Power 5 team in Washington State and avenged an earlier season loss to WSU. So there were some good things about that as well.
Yes, that is. Eastern had a really great season this year. One of the spotlight players that I wanted to talk about was Steele Venters. I know you remember this, but when we were at the arena when they played WSU, that was the first time I've ever been introduced to Steele Venters, and I was really impressed. And I came up to you afterwards, and I asked who he was because I had no clue who he was. Kind of explain who Steele Venters is to you and what you've seen over the last 3 years.
Well, Steele is, number one, an outstanding young man. What Gonzaga is getting a guy that's not going to cause any problems. He's going to fit in well in the locker room. He is just tremendous off the floor, just a great character guy. Comes from a fantastic family, and I think Zag fans are going to enjoy watching him this year on the floor. He's a little different player than some of the guys they've lost. He is sneaky athletic, I would say. He has really grown in that area. He has expanded his game to where he can come off ball screens. He can shoot in the mid-range. He can post up if he's guarded by a smaller defender. All stuff he didn't really have in his bag when he came to Eastern. When he came to Eastern, he was 6'7", about 150 pounds is all. He was just a string bean, and he's worked really hard over the last 4 years, counting his redshirt year, at getting himself stronger, getting himself faster, getting himself a little more explosive, and that has worked. I'm going to be very interested to see how he does in Gonzaga's system with the advanced training mechanisms they have there at Gonzaga. Which is school at Eastern, like Eastern, just they don't have the cash to be able to do some of the things that GU can afford to do in what they call their lab.
Okay, question for you. Okay, so he shot 42% his freshman year and 41% his freshman year, 43% his sophomore year. His junior year, he shot 37%. When I watch him, I feel like he is a scorer of the basketball, and I feel like, is he just shooting more? Did he just shoot more this year so his stats would come down a little bit more? What was going on there?
I think two things. Number one, he was the marked man on the other team's scouting report. So last year, Eastern had, I should say 2 years ago, Eastern had other guys to prepare for, other key scorers. And this past season, he was the guy that was coming back that had handled the bulk of the scoring. And so I think he was the guy that other teams decided they needed to stop. So he got less good looks from the three-point line than he had in previous years. And then the other thing that I would say, and this is just me talking and not a necessarily a factual opinion, but I think he worked so hard on some of his other parts of his game that maybe he didn't shoot as many jump shots, three-point shots as he had in other years, and so maybe he took a little bit of a step back there as he was working on other things a little bit more. So that's a possibility. Again, that's not anything that I've seen with my own eyeballs, or just something that I thought about, and I never asked anybody this year because I don't want to dwell in the negative necessarily in my position as the radio broadcaster. So I think maybe both of those, maybe we saw that a little bit. Steele was a little more streaky this year than he had been in the past. He was pretty consistent. His sophomore year is the 21-22 season, let's call it. He was a little more consistent that year. This past season, he was a little bit more streaky. But again, Gonzaga, with the way they do things and their lab and the stuff that they can do that maybe they couldn't do at Eastern, I have no doubt that he's going to be back to a 40% three-point shooter or better for the Zags.
Okay, that's what I like to hear. I sure hope so. I've been kind of doing a little research on him, and Dan Dickau called him almost an exact replica of Corey Kispert.
Well, if he turns out anywhere close to Corey Kispert, that would be I think Zag fans would be turning handsprings over that, and I think Steele would too, because that would mean that he'd maybe have entry into the NBA at the end of this whole thing. So he is not as physically strong as Kispert, I will say that. But if Dan Dickau wants to use that for a comparison, who the heck am I to argue with him? He's seen a lot more basketball than I have. He may not have seen Steele as often as I have, but I think that's a good, favorable comparison for Steele. And as I said, Kispert's a little bigger, a little more physical. Probably, the Zags, when Kispert was there playing the four, were probably a better team than they were when he was at the three. When they got smaller, I think they probably were better some of those years. I don't know that Steele can play the four, size and strength-wise, which Kispert could. So, but, again, in that lab in another, 4, 5, 6 months, Steele may put on another 10 pounds without sacrificing any explosiveness or speed or anything along those lines, and maybe that's becomes a moot point. We'll have to wait and see.
Okay, couple other things real quick. Tyrese Davis, is he coming back this year?
That is an unknown at this point in time because Tyrese had knee surgery. I haven't talked to the coaches recently. At the last time that I talked to them, it was unsure how great the damage was. And so he had that surgery, as I understand it, but I don't know the prognosis at this point in time, so I can't speak any more on that. If he's not out for the year with something more, a major reconstruction, then he will be back in 23-24.
Okay, he is my favorite player on that Eastern team. Like, just all around, like, I really like. That's kind of like the player that I would like to, like, that I mold, like, my game after. I would like to, like, be like. So that is one of my favorite players on that team. So I sure hope that he comes back.
Yeah, he really did a nice job at the point guard spot for Eastern, and when he got hurt, he still played through his injury, missed a game or two, but still played through it for the most part. But he didn't have the explosiveness. He didn't have the power or the speed that he had during the regular season. You could really tell that he was just a little bit off. So hopefully his surgery went well and the damage is lesser rather than greater, and we'll see him back at some point in 23-24.
I agree. Okay, one last thing real quick. Who should we be watching for this year? Give us one player that you think that you've seen maybe at the end of the season last year that you just think that is going to take that next jump.
Well, this is something that's going to be harder to do probably on a year-to-year basis with name, image, likeness, and the open transfer portal. And the NCAA says transfers are going to be limited, but they've put in their little bylaw there that if you claim it's for you're transferring for your mental health, then you can have additional transfers. So a lot of guys are going to be saying that they're going from this place to that place because it's going to improve their mental health, because that is the only, you can still have, the NCAA wants to go back to the old days where you have one transfer, and if you have a second transfer, then you have to have a redshirt year to sit out. And then they'll give you another transfer now with the grad transfer, but you'll see guys still transferring for a third or a fourth time, and how they're going to do it is blaming mental health, and that will allow you to freely transfer. So we're going to see, with the name, image, and likeness, that we're going to probably, especially at the low to mid major levels, teams are going to be turning over 50% or more of their roster every year, instead of losing 2, 3, maybe 4 people to graduation and maybe another to a transfer. You're going to be losing 5, 6, 7, maybe 8 to transfers, because schools like Eastern don't have money to pay name, image, likeness. They don't have a collective to where guys are getting money, et cetera, et cetera. So if somebody's willing to pay you money, why the heck aren't you, going to take that if that's what you're given? So having said all that, there's 3 players that I would, and there might even be a 4th for Eastern, but Cedric Coward is back. Coward was the first man off the bench for Eastern this year. He's a long 6'6", has the ability to play 4, maybe 5 positions and guard all 5 positions, and he'll likely be in the lineup as a starting 3-man this year for Eastern, whereas he was the first man off the bench, usually playing the 4 spot in the 22-23 season. So Cedric Coward is 1. Ethan Price is 2. Price is a 2-year returning starter, freshman of the year in the Big Sky 2 years ago. Honorable mention All Big Sky last year. I think he's set to take another step forward in the 23-24 season. Casey Jones took a big step forward last year, starting at the 4 spot. I think he'll take another big step in 23-24. Very athletic player, 6'6", really bouncy, has a good 3-point shot, but maybe confidence was lacking a little early on. I think he shot a little better in conference play. So I think that he's going to be interesting to watch. And Dane Erikstrup is also going to be interesting to watch, coming off the bench for this team. They'll play him with Price some next year, and that's something they did not do, or did very rarely this year. So you could have a couple of 6'10" guys in there for Eastern. Both guys can shoot the 3, both can pass, both can they've got skill sets that complement one another. So I think that'll be interesting to watch this year as well. A lot of new players, though, coming to Cheney, and it'll be very interesting to see how they get those players brought into the group and get them immersed into the culture and immersed into the offense, because how Eastern does things takes a little bit of time usually to try to figure out what you should be doing. It's a very intricate offense, and the defense is a little intricate as well. And so this past year, it took them about a month to get everybody on the same page. They were a better team from mid-December on. I would assume it'll be something similar this year, being as how they basically are replacing their entire backcourt.
Okay, I lied. One more thing real quick. I seen the Groves brothers. I seen one went to the NBA. Another one is transferring again. I think that's his 3rd transfer. How is that going to go about?
Well, that is going to be a grad transfer this time around, because
Really?
Jake did not use a grad transfer to go to Oklahoma. He had a free transfer to Oklahoma from Eastern. Now he'll use his grad transfer, which would be his 2nd one. So that's all good still. So Jake is fine with that. Yes, he's going to Virginia, playing for former WSU coach Tony Bennett.
Yes.
So that'll be fun to watch him in that situation. Tanner went to the Portsmouth Invitational, which is where a lot of college seniors go. A lot of NBA scouts go there to get eyeballs on guys, and Tanner had a very good tournament, was named to the all-tournament team. When I talked to him, he came to the Eastern Oklahoma State game because he was at University of Oklahoma, so an easy drive to Stillwater from where he was. Got booed, by the way, by the Oklahoma State crowd, who knew who he was. He was sitting in the stands. They showed him on the Jumbotron, and the crowd gave him a big round of boos there on the Jumbotron, which was funny to be a part of. But when I talked to Tanner after that game, he believes that he will likely end up in Europe for the 23-24 season, but with pre-draft workouts and the Portsmouth Invitational and varying other things that he's now taking part in that he didn't know about at the time. He hadn't been invited to Portsmouth, or at least didn't tell me he had been invited to Portsmouth, and some of the other things going on. Maybe he'll be good enough to get into a camp or to be included in the summer league, something along those lines. So that's what I'm kind of waiting to see with him, whether he'll get a summer league invitation. Won't get drafted in the NBA draft, but we'll see if he gets a summer league invitation, if he can earn a camp invite off of that, or if that just helps him get a better deal in Europe.